Lloyd still wanted to train Shiro, and he managed to teach him basic commands like giving paw or separating his legs, which impressed Silva. However, the young man wasn't entirely satisfied because although Shiro could follow basic orders, he didn't know how to give more complex ones, like spinning 3 times and then jumping. Despite trying to instruct Shiro using his mana, the animal seemed to struggle to understand and ended up confused, performing strange and nonsensical dances. They both simultaneously thought of someone who could help them and remembered that Princess Alice's garden tower was filled with animals, where they might find assistance. Upon arrival, they saw a bunch of animals living peacefully, but everything seemed strange to Grimm, who wanted to know who this Alist was. Lloyd explained to the demon that she was the 6th princess of the kingdom and also his older sister, who had a great love for animals and had the tower built to house all kinds of them. From a distance, Alice spotted her younger brother and didn't hesitate to jump to greet him, resulting in an unusual kiss between siblings. The jealous Silva quickly worried about his master, who was surely in critical condition and needed a 10-minute dose of his kisses to catch his breath. Meanwhile, Eris, the princess's caregiver, scolded her for always kissing her brother whenever she saw him. Alice defended herself, saying she did it because he was adorable. She quickly identified Lloyd's wolf bear and was eager to shower him with affection. While she did so, Silva asked Lloyd if it wouldn't be better to find someone else, fearing they wouldn't be able to explain to the impulsive princess how she controls the animals. Lloyd, aware that he might be wasting his time, decided to stay and asked his sister to introduce him to a monster. She had already summoned Liru, a lesser Fenrir, but even Grimm knew that it was a superior class wolf bear. Lloyd was also surprised that such an animal had reached them undetected. Not only that, but his sister technically gave the animal an order to return Silva's tiara, leading Lloyd to suspect that Alice had remotely ordered her superior wolf to take Silva's tiara without anyone noticing. This excited Lloyd because it meant that his sister knew how to command something complex without showing direct signals. Intrigued, Lloyd asked his sister to teach him how to communicate like her. Alice didn't hesitate to share her true secret, which was her incredible love. According to her, if you love, you could understand any monster, prompting all the animals to flock to her. This demonstrated her knowledge of the subject. But Eris urged them not to waste time trying to emulate Alice, as she was a unique genius. However, the princess asked her servant not to be so mean, as her little brother was just starting to learn Alice could do the same, and she sent all her animals to attack. The servants, Lloyd, who was increasingly interested in controlling them, actually misinterpreted everything, thinking that his master was interested in learning about love. Silva began to fantasize about Lloyd, imagining that he would ask her to teach him everything about love, which made her daydream in a very strange way. Lloyd understood why there was a difference between him and his sister. He gave direct orders while his sister seemed to share her wool with the animals. For example, he noticed that when she ordered the animals to go after them, a hint of her mana flowed from her head to give the animals the command. In other words, his sister, unaware, was sending images through mana to the animals, and they obeyed. He realized that this was the best way to do it because the image was understood instantly. He began to share one, which seemed to work with Shiro, who now spun 3 times and jumped, which made Lloyd very happy as he had learned something new. Eris was surprised by the young boy's talent, while Silva wanted to explain his love in his own way, but the princess was still somewhat angry because, for her, it was love, not all those difficult things they were talking about, that made the animals love her. However, Lloyd agreed with her, despite the images she conveyed. If the animals didn't love her and couldn't empathize with her, they wouldn't listen to her at all. As they left, very pleased with the new skills, Silva asked the young man to prepare for a good dose of training, which was interrupted by Prince Albert, who needed him for other matters. This led to a small argument between them. Then, the 4th prince, Dien, or rather Lloyd's older brother, arrived excitedly upon learning that Lloyd could enchant magic swords, and he couldn't. While he didn't deny that Lloyd could do it, he wanted to see it with his own eyes. Therefore, they went with Albert to a forge. For this reason, Noit was practically obliged to do it. Albert also reminded her that her older brother was a blacksmith and left for the neighboring country at the age of 10 because he was too famous for his forges. Lloyd affirmed that it was incredible since a prince does not usually do this type of work, but Dien just wanted to see how he did it. So Lloyd began his work while his older brother internally talked about how everything he had heard must have been a lie, as enchantments themselves are very advanced, and applying them to an already magical sword should be impossible, even where he studied. Nobody could perform such a feat, so he swore that if it wasn't true, he would make the young man pay with the force of a tiger for lying. But when he finished enchanting the sword, we see that Dien almost fainted, and Albert couldn't blame him since they were seeing something impossible to do at an almost inhuman speed. And when Dien saw the sword, he saw the strength, elasticity, and even automatic repair it had thanks to Lloyd's spells, and he couldn't help but congratulate his little brother, calling him Lloydo, then lifting him and being happy because with him, his dream of the ultimate magical sword could become a reality. Dien began to explain that common magical swords can be improved. After all, when the steel is engraved with the spell, it allows you to apply more advanced magic than usual. In other words, with a good warrior alongside a good magician, they could do something very crazy. For that reason, Dien also revealed that magic was incredible for him when he was young, although unfortunately, it didn't work out for him since he didn't have the talent. But magical swords always caught his attention because talent wasn't needed, so to speak. Everyone could use them and cast fire or wind just by wielding them, making their main goal to have everyone in the country with magic like in the swords. Lloyd began to see a new opportunity to learn since he was interested in seeing what incredible weapons he could create with his brother. He gave the green light to help him, so once the iron was burning, Dien wanted to first make a sword that would emit fire when wielded, to which Lloyd wanted to use some flame insignias. But Dien knew that it couldn't be possible since this magic had 14 parts, while a magical sword could only handle 5, so the boy claimed that he only had to divide it in 2 and try. Which they did, but it didn't go very well since the iron couldn't handle so much power, so the young man understood that simply that spell was too heavy, so he tried to compress it even more into 4 parts, and as he did, we see from a distance Shiro and Silpha, who ended up helping the boy since all the spells kept destroying the iron. But Lloyd still wanted to know how it was possible that it didn't work since he had reduced the intensity many times to the point where the iron should withstand it. And when Grimm noticed that he had never seen Lloyd so pensive, he also saw something strange in the magic container, so he discreetly approached his master, who was receiving moral support from Dien, to talk about the essence of mana, which Dien mentioned that he practically obtained at the price of 5 for 1. So Anoit used a purification spell on the magic solution, and upon noticing that it was of poor quality, they would have to make a new one, but for that, they would have to go to a dungeon to kill monsters, to which Silpha proposed. Although Silpha eventually convinced him, this time, they did everything more formally, first taking him to the Adventurers Guild where Katarina received them to register. After putting in the name and the data, they had to use a sphere that provided an approximate talent assessment in numbers, something that brought back bad memories for Lloyd since he had a tough time with the same tool in his other life, and likely would in this one too, as it could break when touched. So he compressed his mana as much as possible to avoid attracting attention, which worked, as he was given an E rating, and the men behind him began to mock, as any weakling nowadays had at least a D. Despite this, Katarina noticed that he had an A in magic, so he could be considered an experienced mage. However, Lloyd still didn't know how he couldn't reduce that ability either. And the receptionist didn't hesitate to call him a promising genius who might even surpass the Silver Sword, who was a legend that conquered all possible dungeons. Nevertheless, Silpha requested a dungeon mission to kill monsters, although the receptionist couldn't give them the mission because they needed at least a rank B adventurer. And to continue with the problems, the men behind them started asking Silpha out on a date, but she didn't hesitate to showcase her sword skills. Katarina, to prevent any deaths, revealed that Silpha was the Silver Sword, but she couldn't give them the mission either because if she registered again by rank, she would automatically be demoted to rank C. That's when our savior appears to help. But Silpha didn't see anything and took her home. But since she kept bothering, she ended up confessing that she couldn't. Finding Roberto was never the main reason why he entered so many dungeons, but rather to see if he was searching for plants in one of them. So Tao's last offer was to introduce him to Albert so that he could have a date with him, and in return, she would help them. Silpha accepted this because it would be the fastest way to get the ingredients. While the young ones fought monsters, we see Albert worrying about the time it would take his brother to collect the ingredients, which would likely be days. As a war was looming, they might not be able to achieve their personal project. However, to impress everyone, Lloyd managed to obtain ingredients in record time, with which they were able to create the swords they wanted, although it was slightly more powerful than usual. When bedtime arrived, Lloyd was very satisfied with everything he had learned. When he least expected it, Suki showed him that they had an infiltrator in the castle who, for some reason, seemed to have divided space in two.